So, are the three of us here?
I'm here, but who's the third one?
That would be me. Nice to meet you, gentlemen. I'm Dagoth Ur the Sharmat, but my friends just call me the...
You seriously invited someone from an entirely different franchise?
Yeah. If I were to bring a fellow Bionicle, they'd take either your side or mine. Dagoth Ur doesn't know us, so at least his neutrality is guaranteed. Besides, his voice is pretty sexy.
He does have a sexy voice.
Thank you. And what do you mean with sides? What's the deal between you two?
We're brothers.
No, we're not.
Yes, we are.
Dude, I literally created you, and we never talked to each other until 15 minutes before I killed you.
Look, guys, Nerevar will arrive in like 15 minutes, so I don't have much time for this. Can we start already?
Yes!
Welcome, gathered friends, to this tier list where destiny is made.
Because we have nothing better to do, we'll be reviewing the 9 Star Wars movies.
And we're starting with Episode 4. I'm ready to put it in S tier, but we should probably elaborate why.
This movie is a masterpiece in every way. Not only was it the movie that started one of the greatest franchises in history, but it was also top tier in terms of practical effects at the time.
And the soundtrack. Great beings, the soundtrack.
The plot was simple, to be fair, but the execution was sublime. To put it in anything below S tier would be a crime, so Dagoth Ur welcomes you, Episode 4, to the top of the list.
Now on to Episode 5, which improves upon perfection.
Easily the best, hands down. It raises the stakes by giving it a darker tone and continues with the evolution of the characters, especially Luke. I can only imagine how the crowd reacted to the Dad Vader scene.
Han and Leia had such good chemistry together, being a perfect example of how opposites attract each other, and Yoda steals the show every scene he's in.
Every scene was great in its own right. The perfect movie with its rightful place as an S tier.
No,
Excuse you.
it doesn't deserve an S tier.
Are you seriously implying that it's not perfect?
Sorry, but the appearance of that filthy Argonian bounty hunter ruined the experience for me.
You mean Bosk? He's a Trandoshan.
I don't care. He's a lizard and therefore an Argonian Noir. It was the worst moment in the entire trilogy, and therefore it doesn't deserve the S tier.
Put it in the S tier.
Yeah, racist comments don't count.
Is this how you honor the Sixth House and the tribe unmourned? You can't dismiss a god's judgment.
Joke's on you. I'm a god too.
No, you're a giant robot.
Oh my god, you guys have giant robots too. We should compare our sizes to see which one's the largest.
My giant robot is bigger than his.
Okay, first off, it was my robot. Second, you didn't even know how to use it and ended up defeated by a meteor made of water.
Enough. Let's continue with Episode 6 and explain why it's an S tier.
Not so fast, Pterodax.
You can't be serious.
Actually, I agree with your daddy. Episode 6 didn't live up to the standards of its predecessors.
Are you kidding? This movie was fantastic. The emotional conflict between Luke and Vader was the perfect redemption arc for the latter, and had many memorable moments, such as Luke's display of power in the Sarlacc pit.
Yes, but everything leading up to that scene was both nonsensical and boring. Luke's plan to rescue Han was to get everyone captured and bet all his money on the hope that no one would find his lightsaber inside R2 after becoming Jabba's property.
And don't even get me started on the Ewoks. How can armored soldiers equipped with blasters be defeated by stones and arrows? If only the mongrel armies of the Septim Empire could be expelled from Morrowind so easily.
And lastly, the way they solved Luke, Leia, and Han's love triangle felt really cheap. Leia's final decision was influenced by the sudden twist that making out with Luke would be committing incest instead of following her actual feelings. They really didn't know how to solve the conflict in a realistic way, so they went for the cheap route. Plus, Han doesn't get any character development.
I hate you both.
Don't get us wrong. The movie is still good, and I loved the emotional conflict between Luke and Vader, as well as the speeder chase in Endor. But it failed to live up to the quality of the writing that its predecessors had.
Don't do this to me.
Sorry, Terraboy, but I think it should go to a B tier.
Don't call me Terra Boy.
I sense that some fans are going to kill us for ranking it so low, but I agree with this decision. The movie did give us some good memes, though.
Speaking of memes, it's time for the prequel trilogy.
F tier. All of them.
Whoa, 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 I didn't take you for a prequel hater.
They ruined Star Wars for me. Too much bullshit and CGI.
It's true that they had flaws and can't compare to episodes 4 and 5, but they had many redeeming qualities.
Episode 1 is actually my personal favorite.
Oh, you mean the one featuring Jar Jar Binks?
I'm not saying I like Jar Jar. I mean that the film was pretty good overall.
Oh, please. They spent too much time on bureaucratic conversations and people sitting in semicircles. Nothing happens for half of the movie.
While it's true that there's a lot of talking and they do nothing to make it dynamic and entertaining, those scenes are important to the plot, so saying that nothing happens is a bit of a stretch.
Besides, the action-packed scenes more than make up for those. The pod race scene, which was a reference to Ben-Hur's chariot race, by the way, is an absolute classic. And this movie has easily the greatest live-action lightsaber duel ever made.
I second that.
But the midichlorians ruined the Force.
And there it goes. Look. The midichlorians didn't change any already established concepts of the Force. They just added a new layer to it. And frankly, it's a blessing we have it because now we know why some people are strong in the Force and others aren't.
The film may not have been well received during its release, but nowadays it is very loved by the community. This movie certainly aged like fine wine.
Which is why I'm putting it on A tier.
Don't you dare!
Actually, I agree with him. I wouldn't say it's better than The Return of the Jedi. Put it on B tier.
Thank you!
I respect both your opinions, but...
A tier, A tier, A tier. A tier, A tier, A tier.
Good to see you came to your senses. But how about we put it on S tier?
Don't push it.
Okay, now in contrast, I consider Episode 2 the worst of the prequels. I don't know what you guys think.
Absolutely.
What? No! It has easily the most hype-inducing third act of the entire saga.
Indeed, but everything leading up to that point felt pretty boring in comparison. It's those flaws that Pterodax mentioned about Episode 1. The talking scenes were still relevant to the overall plot, but they didn't feel dynamic.
But the Jango Fett and Clone Army conspiracy is the most interesting part.
Yes, but that was only half of the second act. The other half was the problem.
Seriously, you could remove the boringly cringe romance between Anakin and Padme, and the movie would be 10 times better. All that happens is Anakin uses bad poetry, Padme uses a horny dress, Anakin goes to a Tusken village and kills not just the men, but the women and the children too, and that's it. What's worse is that we barely see a hint of friendship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. In Episode 4, the latter claimed that they were BFFs, but the movie failed to show that. Instead, they argue almost every time they interact. They shouldn't have been separated, in my opinion. Plus, Anakin was a horrible, whiny character trying to be edgy.
I get what Lucas was trying to do with Anakin, but his characterization was poorly executed. He would improve in Episode 3, but here he needed to be fleshed out a little. Plus, I wish we had more scenes with Count Dooku. He was such an interesting character.
You do know everything you two mentioned was fixed in the Clone Wars TV series, right?
Yes, but we're talking about the movies, not the overall timeline. Besides, not everyone would watch Clone Wars, so all that context was mandatory for the movies to deliver. At the end of the day, Episode 2 had more potential than it ended up showing.
I guess you do make a good point, but you have to admit the third act was dope.
Oh, absolutely. The Battle of Geonosis is one of my top 5 moments of the saga. My inner child was screaming when the Jedi showed up in the arena and when the clone army came to the rescue.
I admit that it was awesome, but Yoda's duel with Dooku ruined it for me.
What? Why?
His fighting style was just ridiculous, constantly jumping and looping like there's no tomorrow.
Well, how do you expect him to fight? He's a green Dwemer.
He shouldn't fight at all in the first place. Yoda is a pacifist old man that would reject violence at any cost, not a friggin' Beyblade.
You're basing your opinion on the originals, but these are the prequels, which happened before that. Think of it as a character development, where at first Yoda embraces conflict, but the events of Episode 3 make him embrace pacifism and peace instead.
You just said peace twice. Read a fucking book.
I don't care. I'm a god. How can you rectify a god? What a grand and intoxicating innocence.
Hey, that's my line!
So in conclusion, I think Episode 2 should be a C tier.
Whatever.
I'd like to put it in a B tier, but I understand why you would think otherwise.
Now, last but not least, Episode 3. I think we can all agree on the fact that it improves on its predecessor's flaws.
Yeah, at least this time it started with a space battle instead of a boring exposition. But it still has many of those throughout the movie.
True, but it's an entertaining movie nonetheless. It also highlights the arrogance of the Jedi and how it caused their eventual downfall for being blinded to the truth that was right in front of them. Then again, we don't get to see that very often, but at least we understand why Anakin turned out the way he is.
Palpatine's plan to earn his trust by being the father he never had was actually a good plot point. But again, we should have seen more of that in these movies. Understand why Anakin trusts him more than his own master.
Plus, have you read the novelization? The movie should have taken a page from it, no pun intended. Okay, pun totally intended.
My biggest letdown was Grievous. Since I first saw him in Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars series, I thought he was a totally capable Jedi killer. But in the movie, he was a joke in comparison. There's more that could have been done with this character.
Regardless, this is the most tragic movie of the saga. Anakin tries to protect what he loves the most, but in the end, he's the one who destroys it because of his obsession with power.
The Order 66 scene was heartbreaking, and the duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan was the perfect send-off to this trilogy. I don't think it's the best lightsaber duel, but it's still one of my favorites. Even though Obi-Wan was the victor, it felt more like a loss than a win, as he had just struck down his best friend. As a side note, in this movie we do get to see more of how much Obi-Wan and Anakin cared for each other until the latter became a Sith.
Even I felt something at the very end when Obi-Wan delivers Luke to Owen and Beru. A glimmer of hope in the coming darkness.
Fucking hypocrite!
Hey, fuck you, let me enjoy it.
I think this movie should at least be a B tier, don't you agree?
I actually wonder whether it should actually be an A, not gonna lie.
No, B.
B it is then.
By the way, can we talk about the fact that Palpatine copied my plan?
Pardon?
Yeah, we both disguised ourselves as old politicians, convinced the population that their heroes were the bad guys, and seized control of the universe with a master stroke. And I did it in 2004, while Palpatine did it in 2005.
Huh. Well, anyway, let's get the sequels out of the way and put them all in F tier.
Actually, hold that thought.
Excuse me?
Did you seriously invite a sequel defender?
No, let me explain. The sequels are the worst Star Wars content, that is undeniable. However, you have to admit that Episode 7 was at least somewhat redeemable.
Oh, come on, it was a literal rip-off of Episode 4. It relied on nostalgia alone to make money.
Yeah, but it did try to add some new stuff.
Oh yeah, thanks for reminding me that they decanonized the expanded universe.
That got me angry too, I know. What I mean is it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. It was building up something, and you have to admit you came out of the cinemas looking forward to seeing what would come next. All this hatred towards Episode 7 is a consequence of the letdown that Episodes 8 and 9 were.
I guess you do have a point. The sequels did have a lot of potential, and The Force Awakens used most of it.
I'll even admit that Kylo Ren was the most interesting member of the new cast. If he had been handled better in the following movies, he could have been a great redeemed villain, like Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I think its biggest flaw was that it separated Poe Dameron from the main cast for the majority of the movie. He, Rey, and Finn were set up to be the spiritual successors of Luke, Leia, and Han. So they should have spent more time together to build a stronger bond.
In my opinion, the worst part was how Han was handled. By the end of Episode 6, he had become a better person, far from the scoundrel he used to be. But in this movie, they threw his entire character arc to the trash compactor because the developers thought that people liked Han the Smuggler, not Captain Solo. His death did make me feel sad. Regardless, I think Dagoth Ur is right. It's not bad enough to qualify it as an F tier, but it's not good enough to compete with all its predecessors.
So E tier?
E tier.
Now, on to the infamous Episode 8. Is there something you want to say in its defense, Dagoth Ur?
Oh, no, that movie was trash.
It ruined Luke Skywalker. From the humble Jedi who earned his place as one of the greatest heroes of the franchise, to a drunk quitter who just abandoned his loved ones to their luck. People kept comparing him to Obi-Wan and Yoda's self-imposed exile, but at least they were actively laying the foundation for the defeat of their enemies. Luke was completely mishandled. He didn't even become a mentor for Rey. She learned everything herself.
The movie also takes an unnecessary detour to a subplot about freeing animals, and it gets nowhere. It only serves to build the ship between Finn and Rose when the last movie was shipping him with Rey. It confused the hell out of me, and it didn't advance the narrative at all.
And don't even get me started with Holdo. What a bland and intoxicating character. She disrespects those who disagree with her, and the movie keeps treating her like she's the hero. If you create a toxic character, don't tell the audience that they're the type of person they should look up to. Seriously, I never thought I'd hate someone more than I hate cliff racers, but I guess even a god can be impressed nowadays.
And Akbar. My boy Akbar. They got rid of him in the very first act. He's a fan favorite and he got killed unceremoniously. Holdo's role could have been filled by Akbar, and instead of having a toxic boss, we'd have a responsible leader. That conflict with Poe Dameron could still exist, but for different reasons.
To be fair, Rian Johnson isn't necessarily a bad director. He's made some decent movies such as Knives Out, but he was definitely not the right guy for Star Wars. He was way too obsessed with subverting expectations.
F tier is too good for this movie, though. We need to create a lower tier.
I got you covered, bro.
You fuck!
Forgive me, but I am enjoying this.
All right, last and probably least, Episode 9.
Yeah, let's get this over with. Nerevar has already found the tools of Kegranak, so he'll be at the Heart Chamber any second now.
Okay. I guess we can all agree that this movie was almost as bad as the last one, right?
The somehow Palpatine returned line represents the little care they put into this film. I guess Ryan's mess in the last movie was partly to blame, but they could have done a much better job to fix it. Instead, we got plot twists and conveniences out of nowhere, such as General Hux being the spy that sided with the Resistance. Not because he had a change of heart, but because he wanted to screw over Kylo Ren. What the fuck?
Speaking of plot conveniences, that super ancient Sith dagger that pinpointed the location of the map to Exegol, located in the scraps of the second Death Star, is a prime example. Did none of the scriptwriters seriously stop to think how little sense that plot point made?
And the Knights of Ren, who became the Grievous of the prequels, except that they had no personality whatsoever. Just standing there being menacingly while doing nothing, and for some reason they weren't cool enough to get their own lightsabers. What a waste.
The only moment that made me feel something was when Han Solo's ghost appeared to help Kylo redeem himself. That, and Chewbacca's reaction to Leia's death. The rest of the movie was a roller coaster of screw-ups.
Speaking of Chewbacca, can we talk about the death fake-out they did with him? They didn't even wait 10 minutes to reveal that he was alive. If you're going to do that, why pretend that he died in the first place?
In regards to the final battle, the Avengers Endgame ripoff shows that the producers just didn't know what to do with the film. I was actually enjoying the battle until that point, but that whole struggle against a major foe was stripped away by the coming of infinite reinforcements to whom we had no attachment towards. They just copy-pasted a scene from another franchise that hyped its fans, hoping that it would have the same effect without setting up the elements that created that hype in the first place. They set the stage for a super-powerful enemy, and the writers found themselves cornered. So the only way they found to fix it was to give the heroes a greater power that would allow them to outmatch the bad guys, removing the stakes altogether.
And remember how people complained about the romance between Anakin and Padme? Well, at least those two had an actual development. But Rey and Kylo? No. They kiss out of nowhere without any previous hint of them having fallen in love. And 5 seconds later, Kylo dies of cringe.
The whole movie just lacked any form of passion. I don't think even the producers cared about what they created as long as they got paid for it. And even if they did, they didn't want to satisfy the fans. Just themselves. Disney is the worst thing that's ever happened to Star Wars.
And for a company that brands themselves as inclusive, they sure like to hire only Imperial Enois and Redguard Eswits as actors. What happened with the Dunmer representation?
Well, at least we got Rogue One and Rebels, so the problem was more about the people in charge rather than Disney itself. Regardless, this movie was bad, and goes to its rightful place at the F tier.
Finally!
I really tried to like this movie, but in the end I was forced to face the fact that Star Wars had bad content. The saddest part is that the reason the last two movies were so terrible was because the directors didn't even establish a proper timeline. They each tried to make their own movie, and in consequence we got utter chaos. If only they stuck to George's original script.
We can only hope that they learned their lesson and will improve the quality of their content in the upcoming movies and series. I really want them to succeed at creating good Star Wars.
Only time will tell. Anyway, I need to go. Nerevar is nearly here, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he reincarnated into this time.
Sure. Good luck with that.
Oh, but we should totally hang out someday. And bring your giant robots. I would like to compare yours with my Akulakan to see which one is the biggest.
How tall is your robot anyway?
I don't know, about 100 meters or so.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, quite impressed. What?
Well, we're leaving now. Take care.
No! What did you mean by cute? Oh, sure. Please ignore me. Oh, there you are. Welcome, Moon and Star, to this— Oh, are you serious? A fucking Khajiit?